Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Hello, Emily, Valeria. It's very nice to have the opportunity to chat with you. Thank you for listening to this talk, whoever is on the other side of the screen. I'm going to do a very brief introduction of our two guests today. We agreed that we didn't want something like very long, so I'm going to say something brief so you know who they are in case you don't know them. So Valeria Tentoni, she is from Argentina, from Bahía Blanca. She's a writer and a journalist. She writes poetry, fiction, and essay. Well, fiction and nonfiction would be like, so that Emily here in some, I don't know why, but in Mexico and other Latin American countries, like I think that the genres are a little more complicated. In English, it's easier to say fiction and nonfiction, but maybe we can talk about that later. It's something that fascinates me. So Valeria has participated she has been included in several anthologies with her poetry and work. And also I have here, she was the editor of Audiotech of Contemporary Poetry. And right now, I don't know, for how long have you been the editor of Eterna Cadencia, the website of Eterna Cadencia?
Like 5 years now.
Perfect.
5 years, something like that.
For a bit, yeah, and she has done a great job. I always find interesting things in the website. And Emily, she is also a writer and editor. She is the author of And the Heart Says Whatever, Friendship, and Perfect Tunes. And for some years, she was with Emily Books, which is a press. I think right now we're going to talk also in detail about this, but it was a press, right? And right now it doesn't publish books anymore. Right? Am I right?
Yeah. Our last title came out in March of 2020. So.
Okay, but it exists, right? You don't have new books, but you still work with the books that you have, no?
Yeah, the website exists, and we sell the books. All the books are still available there. The ones that are our publications. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I forgot to mention the titles of the two I have here. Author of the books of Valeria. She's the author of Batalla Sonora, Ajuar, and Antitierra, and also of two short story collections, El Sistema del Silencio and Furia Diamante. So the conversation that brings us together today is in part detonated, I think, by the fact that Gris Tormenta, which is this publishing house from Querétaro in Mexico, is publishing in a few weeks, I think, in a few weeks, an essay by Emily, which is called Into the Woods, which is an essay in two parts, I guess. Right now we will also talk a bit more about it, but it's an essay that has a prologue and the essay, and then the epilogue, which you wrote very recently. Right? The essay is from some years ago, but the extra part that you wrote is very recent. So I think it opens a very interesting conversation about why we write, about what is the life of a writer in a way, and the challenges and satisfactions that it has, which I think it's very illuminating to think of the differences and similarities that there are between being a writer here in Mexico or in Argentina or in the United States, which is part of what makes this conversation so exciting, that we have three different perspectives about the same life we want to lead in very general terms. So maybe we can start just to give a little context by Emily telling us a little bit about this essay, which is coming out soon, so people also know about it, and this can start the conversation.
Well, you didn't mention that you translated it, which is important, right?
Yeah, that's right. I did translate it and wrote a prologue for it, so I am very, very deeply familiar with it.
I mean, perhaps more deeply familiar than I am at this point. It was hard to revisit that essay. So the original essay Into the Woods was published in, I'm going to get this wrong, I want to say 2012 or 2013.
2013, I think.
Yeah. And it was part of an anthology that the magazine N+1 put together called MFA versus NYC, which I think was subtitled something along the lines of The Two Cultures of American Writing. And you will all have to tell me whether that is something that can be more widely extrapolated internationally, because I don't know whether other countries have two or more very specific, very sort of well-defined kind of career paths that writers can pursue that feel very mutually exclusive, even though of course there is some cross-pollination. And my essay was unique in that anthology because it's really the essay of someone who has taken neither path and is kind of flailing and failing and being very open about those failures. And then the epilogue, which was written many years later, this past year, is kind of like, here's an update of all the things that have happened since then and all the ways that I am still really not reconciling those two sort of warring tribes. I mean, I still have failed to get an MFA. I still have failed to get an academic job. Neither have I guess succeeded by the lights of the other path, which is NYC, which I guess is like successful commercial publishing. And then of course, there's also LA, right, which is not really covered in the anthology, but the other way that writers make money, at least right now in America, is by like writing, having their book optioned and then becoming an executive producer on the Netflix adaptation of it.
I hadn't thought about that.
It seems like it's happening like to literally everyone but me and my husband. We talk about this all the time. We're like, what, do they just have a meeting every day where they're like, let's figure out how to do everything that anyone's ever scribbled on a cocktail napkin, but just not any of Emily and Keith's books. And then everyone else in the meeting is like, good plan. That's probably not actually Netflix's decision-making process, but it feels like it. Anyway, so yeah, so that's, I guess, is that an accurate representation of the essay? And I do touch on the things that I like have managed to do since writing that essay, like write 2 novels and have this press or this publishing project that published a lot of really good books, I think. But it was a passion project, and it was not like a big like money making.
Well, it never is, right? It's part of what we are going to talk about today.
That's the messed up thing about book publishing, at least in America, is that like it's like going to Vegas. Like some people make a ton of money from this. Some people are out here buying like a sick brownstone, like in Brooklyn, from this. Some people are, some people it is their livelihood. It's just like, it's such a roll of the dice. There isn't, and in America, where like you have to be employed in order to have health insurance, and your whole identity is really tied to your profession, and there isn't a lot of state support for the arts, or really any, it's like, it's really, it feels very cutthroat in a way that I am curious to hear whether it feels that cutthroat in other places as well.
Yeah, it feels like a bit random in a way, at least. What is very different, I think, and maybe we can, I don't know how it's in Argentina, but in Mexico, in order to live from any profession in the publishing industry, including being a writer, being an editor, being a translator, etc., is really difficult. Everybody has other other jobs, or almost everybody has other jobs on the side, but nobody lives from having a publishing house. Nobody. Maybe working in a big, like, transnational one, but not really from these small projects. I don't know, in Argentina it's the same, no? Or
it's like the same, and of course I've read Emily's book. I liked it a lot, and to me it was like science fiction, because those numbers in dollars here, so you can have an idea. In Argentina, $1 is 180 pesos. So dollars are like entelequis, and almost no writer gets, few of them, but the ones who are in a transnational press get money before they write the book. There are some, but there are not many. And then the thing here in Argentina is, to me, is wonderful. We have many tiny little presses, and those tiny presses are independent. And when you get to the rankings, or you get to, I mean, you can be very well read with a book that has been published in a tiny little press, led by 2 or 3 friends, and the books are like totally different. We have all kinds of books, all kinds of styles in the papers, in the covers, I mean, and all these genres are being explored. So the thing here is quite different in that sense, and we translate a lot. That's something else that happens here. We translate authors from other places a lot, and we read them, and we like to, for an Argentinian writer to be translated is nowadays being like something that is starting to happen, especially women, and that's amazing, because, and we are all happy for our Argentinian writers, but living with royalties it's almost impossible. I have published like 7 books now, and this is the first time I get royalties for a book of mine, and this is like common here. We don't feel bad about it. You should come to Argentina, I was telling you earlier. Because we don't get like, we don't get like frustrated because maybe a big author chooses to publish in a tiny press. We're like all the same in some way. We get together and we're like even. I don't know why, but now I'm thinking with you too, because I hadn't thought about it. But it's quite, we have like these ferias, Isabel, ferias.
Like fairs or festivals, like book fairs, yeah.
And the ones which gather the independent presses is huge, very big, and they come from Mexico, from Chile, from Bolivia, from Uruguay. It's quite weird. I mean, if you think it like next to the American way, I wasn't familiar with it. I got familiar with it with your book, and of course, if you have this big chance, and it's like the one chance you can't fail, because here for us, our first book, I don't know in Mexico, the first book is always a problem. You probably fail at it. I mean, my first book, I don't want to republish it, for example, because the first book is a problem, no? I don't know how was it for you, but you're like, the first time you show it to other people. Here you tend to publish it when you are young, and it can be not read, or the critics can be against it, and you're like, okay, if you have them in the rest.
It's funny, no? Because the fact that there's no money involved, or very little money involved, makes it very frustrating, but at the same time kind of relaxing, because there's no money involved, you know? Nobody's making money, so we know that, and then we can like leave the topic aside in a way, like among peers in the publishing world, I think in most Latin American countries, which is very different from the United States, I think. And yeah, that's what I used to be very like angry about it, and used to suffer a lot, like, oh, it's not possible, that there's no money and we have no resources. And right now I'm like, well, maybe if we just accept that we won't live from this, maybe we can just live from something else and then enjoy this as almost, it's almost like yeah, I don't know, like something you do for fun or for love or because you enjoy it, but not to make a professional career. Well, yes, professional, but not economically relevant career. Sorry?
It's not like it's not frustrating, because you need time to write. I mean, to
no problem, no problem.
Here in Argentina, there is a gathering of writers who fight for writers' rights. It's not okay. I mean, we have to get to a better place, but surely it changes things.
Yeah, it's very complicated and very different. So if you are listening to us and you can buy Emily's book when it comes out, you will understand better these kind of differences and what we're like discussing from the publishing world in the States and in Mexico or in Argentina. But the topic which we are, well, the title of this talk is about publishing and feminism, which is always very, I don't know, very complicated for me to discuss this, because I think there are so many ways of understanding the word feminism. And even when maybe we have like this feminist, like, I don't know, like spirit, or what would be the word, como ímpetu in Spanish, like some drive, like feminist drive in us, I think we understand it maybe in different ways, every different like woman, no? Every mind is a world. So my first question for you would be exactly that. Like, what is a relationship in your experience between being a writer and being a publisher in feminist terms? Like, do you consider yourself feminist writers or feminist publishers, and how do these two different identities interconnect in your career? So maybe Emily?
Well, I guess the answer that I am used to giving that relates more to being a publisher has to do with, I'm gonna close the window.
Yeah, that's fine. It's
sort of
New York.
Horrible
New York
fire
is
is
always
happening. Whatever. Tuesday. So you know, when I first started working on what would eventually become the Emily Books imprint, I really had the idea of creating an alternative literary canon, just to counteract the books that I had been taught in college, and also the books that I felt like had been venerated when I was working in commercial publishing, because that's where I started my career. I worked at a big commercial publishing house that was owned by Disney when I first graduated from college, and that was my introduction to the world of how books are sold and marketed. So from that background, it seemed the first thing that seemed really important to me was to create a space where there could be narratives of female subjectivity that had nothing to do with the sort of overarching narrative of heterosexuality, whether that meant that they were overtly queer or just didn't really include any important plot lines that had to do with men or romantic love. And a lot of times the books that we focused on, especially the books that were memoir or near memoir, I know you were talking about how genres are more fungible in different places, but in America, it seems like it until recently, it's been like very strictly, or it goes back and forth, but like for a long time, it was very strictly like fiction, memoir, totally separate genres, that they were narratives of abjection, like sort of narrating the story of being of something horrible happening to you. I mean, the example of the books that we've published more recently that comes to mind most readily is Miriam Gerba's memoir Mean, which is about like very explicitly about rape, about being raped. And but it's also funny. It's like we were going for this tonal thing that I think didn't really exist as prominently in literature, and really has gotten much more popular and widely known now, of just books by women, or women as broadly defined as it could possibly be, that were sort of not telling conventional stories that take, like, not telling the stories that take place within a world that's structured by compulsory heterosexuality and like capitalism, the goals of capitalism really defining what could be construed as like success or a happy ending. And that wasn't ever something that we put down in the, like wrote down in those concrete terms. We were just like, oh, we know it when we see it. It's an Emily book. But when I look back on all of the books that we selected and all of the books that we published, that's the thread that holds them all together. So I don't know if that is, and I guess that's as close as I can come to defining like what feminism means to me. It's like inherently anti-capitalist and inherently like I don't know if it's like unheterosexual, but it definitely doesn't privilege the perspective of men or like their stories, because it's like we've just heard enough of their stories, I think, for a while.
Fair enough. And that's as a publisher, but what about, how do you feel that relates to you as a writer? Do you, when you write, do you, of course, all these things are in your mind all the time because that's like yourself, right? But when you are writing, do you explicitly or consciously think I'm writing a feminist from a feminist perspective, or it's just like I'm writing a book as an author, like from myself, and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, the second one, I think it is more latent, because it's just sort of the air that I breathe. So anything that I work on is inherently going to be informed by that stuff. Although there is in my own work, like my work is pretty commercial and straightforward compared to the sort of more formally inventive and literary work that we published a lot of. But one of the things that is in a lot of my work, my fiction especially, are sort of like moments of really like the characters really like being in their bodies and experiencing sort of like uncontrollable bodily objection. Like this comes but like people vomit a lot in my books for some reason, and it wasn't something that I was aware of until someone pointed it out to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Like people spend a lot of time, you know, being like having hangovers and like eating, you know, and I think that's the only way that sort of the sort of visceral experience of womanhood, and also, you know, there's like there's new motherhood in my most recent book, like those sort of like very sort of, I always want to communicate from a very, very stark and realistic, honest perspective of like what it is like to be a human with a body, I guess. So yeah,
which,
like one of many possible answers to that question.
No, and it's true, no, because the female subjectivity that you were talking about, there are many things that are not usually in books like that, no, like women eating or talking about something else that's not like romantic love or vomiting or whatever, like so many things that we don't usually see in narrative. So I don't know, like that's like an important element, I think. What about you, Valeria?
Well, I'm a writer and I am a feminist, of course, and these two things go in different paths and in the same path at the same time. But I don't write like I don't take the purpose to write feminist literature. I think my activism in feminism, but to write being a woman in a world that is still very unequal and in a world that keeps telling you to be doing some things instead of writing, for example, if you're a woman, is an attitude that is a feminist attitude, because I am like empowered by all the other women who are writing, and I feel empowered by their paths as well. But as an editor, which it was also the topic of this meeting, what I do as a feminist is like, I think feminism can be lived in very different ways. And it's a flexible idea of equality to me, basically. And that a man can be a feminist too, of course. And as an editor, I try to, when I got the magazine I'm the editor of, there was, of course, because it was another moment some years ago, much more men appearing. So I started to give space to other women, of course. I called contributors who were women, and the magazine got even, 50 and 50, as much as I can. And the other thing I try to do as a feminist writer, as a feminist reader, and as a feminist editor is to read other women and give space to them. And not only the living ones, but also the ones who are old, for example, and don't use social network like we do, and have beautiful books and that are forgotten, or untranslated women, or dead women, of course. For example, I don't know, I published today a short story from Octavia Butler. She's not alive here, but she's a great author that maybe in Argentina is not that well known yet. Or I'm writing a prologue for a writer from Costa Rica, Yolanda Oriamuno, which I hadn't read. And for example, she hasn't been read here. And that's, to me, feminism in action. I think feminism is something we can think better in action. And on the other hand, here in Argentina, the Ni Una Menos movement, the movement of the feminists that got finally fighting the abortion law, began in the National Library. That's not like very known as a fact, but the writers were the ones who first gathered in the library and did a gathering and read feminist poems from Susanna Tenon and other writers, and started the movement. Then that grew. I'm sorry, English is like I'm very, pero that started with writers, and that's like it's a powerful movement here, and we're still exploring it, seeing where can it lead us, which freedoms aren't yet haven't yet begun for us, but women writers are being well read here now, and we are getting more space, and of course I'm happy about that, and I am very curious about which other women writers are in other countries, for example. That's another feminist practice. When I meet a girl from other country who is a writer or a reader, I ask, well, who can I read? Who haven't I read yet? Who wrote there? living or not living. Nelly Bly, for example, I hadn't read Nelly Bly. That woman was amazing. And all those women were writers. It's not like this started today. Women haven't started to write today, but they haven't been read because men and their books were hiding them. So we have to move the bricks, I mean, and that's like a party. I mean,
that's kind of how it feels sometimes, not to be like uncovering. In Mexico, also there's a big, the same big movement and very not coordinated, because it's not that everybody is like in meetings saying, "Oh, let's do this," but but many publishing houses are publishing more women, and also from the National University, they have this collection called Vindictas, which is publishing what you were saying, Valeria, women writers that didn't receive the attention they deserved in their moment, and right now they are kind of getting it in a way and getting published, and people are talking about them, and etc. So something that you said, a word that you used, Emily, in your answer, which always, always makes me think, is the word canon. When you say like the canon, no? So I've heard many times people saying that we have to build a female canon or a women canon. And I don't know, I wonder what you think about the idea of a canon itself, not a men canon or a women canon, but like the idea of canon. Should we try to build a female canon, or should we try to maybe not play under those rules, which is what I have maybe inclined towards?
I mean, it is the idea that I began with when I started the project, which was in 2011, and I don't know whether I agree with my initial aims still. I mean, everything that Valeria was just talking about, where the sort of feminism of like words and gestures is commuted into actual movement work, seems like much more important right now and for the past few years. I mean, I still think that literature is important as sort of a groundwork, but I do actually think now, and this is part of the reason why I decided to end the project when I did, that we had sort of reached the end of the utility of telling these stories, you know, because I had made it my goal to just sort of expose these truths to the cleansing, healing light of an audience, and I think it went as far as it could have gone, and people are going to continue to do it, and that's great. And you know, I'm sure I will still continue to participate in it too, to the extent that it has sort of a intrinsic like therapeutic value. But in terms of actually furthering the goals of equality, I don't know that it. I felt really burnt out on it. I felt very like somehow it, like with the sort of rise of the Me Too movement, I really began to feel like a society could still exist with all material conditions still exactly the same, but just these stories being told within it, and people hearing the stories and saying like, that's too bad. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And then nothing changes. And I think I had to go through the whole process of working on this project for 11 years to get there. And so, you know, and also like, feel free to disagree with me. It's like it's something that I want to have my mind changed about if possible, because I know that I'm coming from a place of being very sort of jaded and burnt out and maybe too cynical. But right now, at least, the question of like whether there's a female canon like that we can build, that would be sort of like something that we can teach in schools that like feels, you know, relevant to like younger generations, it almost seems like an obsolete concern to me. Like I do think that it is just like baseline important to read widely and read writers from a lot of different backgrounds, class backgrounds, like nationalities. Obviously, Americans hardly read in translation unless you count like Ferrante and Caspard. And reading more books by women is just like sort of it's an important part of that, but I think it is like sort of like there's no inherent virtue in books like being like by women, you know. That's to be like a very specific kind of book by women that only I know about. So.
Yeah, but do you mean like you mean there's no like in terms of making some fundamental rights better or improving, I don't know, living conditions and etc. of women? That's what you mean? Like more books by women doesn't necessarily have an impact on that? Okay.
I would rather have like policy change and like economic equality than like more like books by any marginalized group like guaranteed to be published in a year. I mean, I want it all, obviously all of it would be good, but like it seems like I think I had naively as a younger person thought that like one goal could be part of the other goal, but now I see them as like worthy goals that are like pretty separate, because I think because I don't know, maybe I might be just too cynical and disillusioned. It may be that and also it may be that this is only, I mean, America is it's a really messed up country, you guys. Like, it's just a very sort of like mentally ill country. Everyone here is like deluded into thinking that they will eventually be millionaires. So they like act and vote against their own best interests. And they're not, you know, and education is very like geared toward preserving like the existing class structure, and it's really like a lot better, I think, in most other countries.
Yeah, that's maybe what I, in a way, what I mean too, which is if we play by these rules that men invented, no, that let's build a canon, let's say like all these books are more important, or these books are more valuable, they should be read and we should all be able to quote from them and etc. So maybe if we play under those rules and try to build a feminine canon or a female canon, maybe we are just putting other people that happen to be women, but that's it, on the top of their group, no? So we are just like replicating is the word, like replicating this structure, but just with powerful women in the top instead of men, which doesn't change the reality of most women writers or not writers, no? Maybe that's kind of what I mean too. But what do you think, Valeria, about a female canon?
I think we should all build libraries in every country. We should all be like changing cards and giving names and books. We have to be reading wider, like Emily said. That's healthy for all of us, for women, for men, for for everyone, because it's important to build learnings on tolerance, on many aspects of human life that we are failing. We are failing as humans. We know it. We have to read wider, because the line is like a problem. But when it comes to canon, I don't know if you were asking us about a feminine canon, and I have a problem with that, because I think we have to discuss genres as well. I mean, I don't read a man or a woman because he or she is a man or a woman, because maybe here in Argentina a lot of things are happening at the same time, and it's very complex, the situation, but maybe we can think of gender as a moving, flexible state of mind. And sometimes I even write as a man. I mean, sometimes to write some pieces of fiction, I have to be in my mind a man. And on the other hand, there are women writers who have transitioned to men. For example, here in Argentina, that's something that has happened. Or on the other side, men who have transitioned to women. And for example, a woman writer that has transitioned to men is not less feminist, or in fact, it's a very active feminist. And genres are something that, as you said, Isabel, maybe el patriarchy has imposed that division, that blue or pink. And we can do something like more complex and more free. And on the other hand, canon is something that I always want to smash. and that's like Borges' legacy, believe it or not, because Borges said, like, read what gives you pleasure. If the book is not for you yet, then the book will wait, or maybe no. Maybe you won't read that book. You have to read what makes you happy, said Borges. And he was it's like rules. And I think we have to break those rules. We have to invent a new kind of freedom to read and to write. And that would be better for all of us, happier, like Borges would say.
Yeah, to play under different
rules.
Yeah, rules or no rules, or I agree. And that's something that always, when people say, oh, we have to fight so that there are more women in the canon, I'm like, I don't know if that's like the fight. Maybe
I want to be read because I'm a woman. I want to be read because I write well.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm angry. I don't want to be in a place because I'm a woman, and I don't want to be taught about the topics in which I have to write, or the topics I can't write about. And if I don't write about certain topics, then I'm not a feminist. How come men can write about anything? I have to write about certain topics. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that kind of reading police. And I'm not okay with rules. I'm a writer because I want to be free. And I want every writer to be free, because when a writer isn't free, a writer is boring, men or women. And I don't want to be bored.
I agree. And this leads to the, in Emily's book, there's this idea about writing from the first person perspective, and the idea of autobiographical writing, even not in how to say, not only in books, but also in social media and social, like I also had a tendency to write. When I was younger, I started writing in blogs too, which is kind of a background that you have. I don't know if you, Valeria, used to have a personal blog. You did?
We all did, maybe.
Yeah, I think we all did, no? Like many of my friends are from that time. That's fine. So I don't know, what's your take on autobiographical writing? Because I think most of the books that Emily Books, like the publishing project, had most of them were from the first person perspective, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, mostly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's something, I don't know, because I always like to put this idea in tension of, okay, the idea that there are autobiographical books that tell the truth, and the other books which are fiction and tell something that's made up. Like, for me, that division is a bit, it doesn't work like that for me. And that's my question for you. Like, do you think there is this difference really? Because in my experience, when I write from a personal point of view or from a first person point of view, I make up a lot of what I write, and I put made up things among real things that really happened. And when I write, I don't write narrative. I am writing a novel, but well, right now, for example, that experience of writing a novel, sometimes I find myself writing things that happened to me maybe in another character or something, like trying to mix real details from real life with fiction. So what do you think about this? I was going to say false, but let's say what you think about this division of fiction and nonfiction, and especially taking from the perspective of blogging, which is something that maybe we did and maybe we were telling our lives, but what of that was real and what wasn't, and maybe we always keep something for ourselves. That's something else too. Emily.
Oh, I think my journey with blogging and with autobiographical writing, and then reading and publishing a lot of autobiographical writing, it did what transforming a hobby into a job almost always does, which is like it soured me on it in a way that felt until recently like it might be permanent. It was kind of like if I was like the world's biggest fan of ice cream, and then I decided that I wanted to like work at an ice cream store and then become like the owner of an ice cream store, and eventually you would just like never want to look at or touch or taste or smell ice cream ever again. But I'm almost at the point now where I can, you know, like once in a while eat some ice cream. Maybe not if it's like the most hyped new ice cream flavor that everyone is like raving about, but you know, but still I'm getting there. Yeah, it's so interesting in terms of everyone's sort of process with fiction and nonfiction too. They used to feel really distinct to me, like just in terms of like how it would feel to produce them, and fiction was a lot harder. And then at a certain point for me that shifted and fiction became much easier. And now the hard thing for me is nonfiction, just trying to sort through all of the details and everything I know and find something there that's a story. I mean, that is pure invention. That is definitely making something up, making a story where there really is not a story, because like the sort of like existentially depressing thing about life is that like it's just life. There isn't inherently a story there. There's like the meaning that we create, but the process of creating that meaning and also the process of sort of defining a self is it's pretty arbitrary and it's ongoing, and there isn't like one single like objective truth that you can eventually discover, and just sort of figuring out a way to hold that, all of those sort of competing truths and competing narratives is like really incompatible for me with like jotting down an off the cuff like diary blog post about like what my day was like. And I wish that I could still do it, because I remember how easy and good that felt. And it was just like the when writing comes easily. And I would love to be able to get back there, but I think that I might have to be like partially lobotomized in order to get back there, or maybe just like have a couple glasses of wine. So yeah, I don't know. I want to hear about what your experience has been like, and what's sort of like easier or harder for you now that you are venturing into the territory of like official fiction.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with expectations, no? Like for me, writing, when I had a blog, like I had it like for 10 years, it didn't feel like it was like a vehicle towards something else. I wasn't doing it like to be a writer or to, I didn't even care if people read me or not. It was really like, at the beginning, it was really like something I just did for pleasure, and that was it. So I think maybe that has to do with it feeling easier than when you are writing and you know there's somebody waiting for, even when there's 3 people, it doesn't matter, but somebody's waiting for what you're writing and somebody's going to read you, and you have like an obligation towards something. Maybe that's part of what feels different. I don't know. What do you think, Valeria?
Well, this is like a topic I think a lot, and when I'm very interested in something, I find other writers who said it better always than me. And there's this wonderful essay from a guy who's dead now called Leonard Michaels, a writer. And the essay is called Writing About Myself or something like that. I have it in Spanish translated, and it's amazing because he says that whenever you're writing, even though before you're thinking of writing autobiography or not, you are writing about yourself. And he says something like, he says, the basic elements of writing, diction, grammar, tone, imaginary, the patterns of sound made by your sentence say a good deal about you. So it is possible you're writing about yourself before you're writing about yourself consciously. And I think that's something you can't control. So I don't think we control writing that much. But on the other side, he tells this story about this one time he went to see Miles Davis playing jazz. And Miles Davis, in a certain moment of the show, turns his back to the audience and keeps playing. And he says that in that moment, Miles Davis played better than ever and in the most intimate way he could have played. And I am very interested in that movement. There's this other writer, a Brazilian, Manuel de Barros, who wrote a collection of poems called Invented Memories, something like that translation. And he says that the best way to not telling anything about yourself is by writing memories, because and then he says that those memories, those invented memories, are memories that he invented for the poet, the character of the poet. There's this very lovely minutes of Sylvia Plath interviewed at home. I don't know if you've seen it, it's in YouTube. And she's saying, it's a me, it's a persona. She's like yelling. It's like, you're not completely you. You are not always completely you. And then there's this technique of hiding, which is more like telling, but it's complex. To me, it's very complex to say it in English, but I'll quote the last one, who is a Chilean poet, Elvira Hernandez, who said that the poet has to be invisible, and that invisibility is important to writing because it allows you to see more, and when you expose yourself, you're not always telling the truth. I mean, the thing I'm trying to say is that exposing yourself is not equal to saying the truth, because you even when you remember things, that's not the truth. I mean, truth and literature is like a huge question. Their correspondence that is not easy to answer, but when it comes to autobiographical material, it's complex, and I think women get it the worst. Jamaica Kincaid said, no man is accused of being autobiographical. And why is that? I mean, why, when a woman writes a book, she has like to enter this church and confess, like, what's true of this? And they don't do that to men writers. And that's not fair. I mean, that's something we have to discuss. I insist we have to be free in order to write, and that truth police, this other kind of police, that truth police is dangerous to freedom in writing to me, and I reject it.
Yeah, also because it doesn't matter, no, for the book. Margarita García Roballo, she's a Colombian writer, has this idea which I love. She says, a good book explodes in your face. It doesn't matter who's behind, who's that persona behind, who's the author behind. It's good literature, exposes itself. It's evident in a way. So yes, maybe something just to we have like 5 minutes. So just to close what you were saying, Valeria. Also, I think the editor is something that is also told about the editor, the idea that we have to be invisible, that she has to be invisible or he has to be invisible. Then when a book is well edited, you don't notice. Or what I would add, when it's well translated, you also don't notice. You only notice mistakes, or you notice things that doesn't sound quite well. So if it flows and you don't even think that it has been translated or that it has been edited, that means that the job of the translator and of the editor was well done. So yes, maybe that's something that we should leave for another talk, because we have time on us. There's something you want to just say to close, maybe some closing remarks, or Emily or Valeria? No? So
no, I think we covered it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much it was really interesting. I have to get on Duolingo immediately and start learning Spanish.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
read the prologue of your book? No, because it's in Spanish, or you can't even read
No,
what I wrote about.
I can't even read it.
That's
Yeah,
terrible.
no. You're gonna have to translate it.
Exactly. Muy bien.
No, you don't have to do that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so when this book comes out, I think you will enjoy it. It's called Into the Woods in English, Dentro del Bosque en español. Thank you to the Oaxaca, to the Feria del Libro Internacional de Oaxaca. Y I think that's it. Thank you for watching us and listening to us. And thank you, Valeria and Emily.
Thank you very much
for the conversation.
Lovely to meet you, Emily.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.